In another episode of clearing up misconceptions people have about certain characters, today we have Venti, the Anemo Archon, God of Freedom, also known as Barbatos. In this video, I will be doing a character analysis on Venti and clearing up some misinformation people have spread about him, or misconceptions you may have about him. Remember to subscribe as it really helps this channel grow. Also, I believe the subscribe button changes colors whenever you say subscribe in a video. Does it? Anyways, let's get into the video. Venti was once a wind spirit. Back then, Mondstadt was ruled by a god named Decarabian, who locked the people of Mondstadt in a windy barrier in a place now known as Storm Terror's Lair, to protect them from the harsh cold winds of Andrias' powers. He thought he was protecting his people, and that his reign was a good one, but the people of Mondstadt yearned for freedom. The nameless bard befriended the wind spirit, and with the help of Amos, who was Decarabian's lover, they overthrowed his rule and freed Mondstadt from the windy barrier. Sadly, the nameless bard died before he could see the world outside the barrier. Venti became the Anemo Archon after Andrias said he didn't want to rule over humans, and made himself into the image of the nameless bard to pay homage to him. 1,600 years later, Mondstadt was under the rule of the Lawrence clan. They were aristocrats who oppressed and enslaved the people of Mondstadt. Once again, the people of Mondstadt yearned for freedom and overthrew their oppressors. Venti helped Vanessa, who was a slave under the Lawrence clan, lead a charge against the aristocrats and founded the Knights of Avonius. Ever since then, they have been the highest authority in Mondstadt and governed it. I have an entire video about the Knights of Avonius that you can watch after this if you'd like to learn more. Venti is the first Archon we meet when we start the game. The theme of his Archon quest is figuring out what is freedom, and how is it different from just abandoning someone. Venti is by most accounts an absent god. He only wakes up when his people truly need his help, only during dire circumstances. It is shown in the Archon quest that he doesn't really know what his people are going through, and everything that has transpired in Mondstadt ever since he went to sleep. Though I believe he could have helped the Valen on his own if we hadn't interrupted him, he still doesn't do much. Ever. His need to give his people the freedom to do whatever they want makes him seem careless and not get taken seriously throughout the quests. He gives off an air of someone who doesn't care about much, aloof. He calls himself the weakest Archon and doesn't rule over his own people. His choice not to rule over his people when he first became an Archon is the reason why they turned into a slave-owning society. So, to fix that problem, he established the Knights of Avonius to rule over Mondstadt, which showed he had learned from the last time he left his people to their own devices to rule themselves. Freedom doesn't necessarily mean you can do whatever you want without the consequences of your actions. It means you can do whatever you want as long as it is just, and if you do choose to do unjustly things, be prepared to suffer the consequences. He's very laid back and even allows Senora to take out her anger on him, even though he could have at least defended himself. I don't think she would have been a match for him if he decided to fight her, but he could have at least defended himself, and he chose not to. He wouldn't use his powers against a child of Mondstadt, and he found her anger justified. He enjoys drinking wine and writing poetry. He tries his best to leave things in the hands of his people, but if push comes to shove, he'll just make us deal with it. I'm kidding, not really. He could be capable of taking care of his people if it was truly necessary for him to do so, but to him and to us, it is pretty obvious the people of Mondstadt are alright just the way they are. They are the only nation that seems to be at peace at the moment. Look, Liyue is at peace too, technically, but they're gonna go into an economic collapse, blah blah blah. Inazuma was oppressed by their Archon, and Fontaine almost drowned. So compared to all the other regions that were being ruled by their Archons, Mondstadt seems the safest and happiest because they're not being ruled by a god, they're being ruled by people. Misconceptions, the crux of the video. When it comes to the misconceptions people have about Venti, it stems from the misunderstanding of his theme. Due to not ruling over Mondstadt like all the other Archons, he is sometimes referred to as a lazy god by the community. They seem to share the same sentiment as Senora, and him calling himself the weakest Archon isn't doing him any favors. The most common one is him being referred to as lazy, like I've said before. While I understand why people will say that, especially seeing what other Archons do for their people, I don't think Venti is lazy. The people of Mondstadt have always yearned for freedom, and he gave them exactly that. Is it not the job of a god to grant the wishes of his people? Obviously, there have been consequences to his actions. When Decarabian was dethroned and he left his people to their own devices, they made a slave-owning nation. So instead, he and Vanessa founded the Knights of Avonius to lead the people of Mondstadt and prevent something like that from happening again. He even questions his own ideals in his Archon quest. His choice to not rule his people isn't out of laziness, it is out of giving them what they want, within reason. He hasn't abandoned them and comes to their aid when they need him. Despite him being, by all accounts, absent, the people of Mondstadt still worship him out of love for keeping them safe, out of gratitude of granting them freedoms. Next, he is a liar or he is manipulative. Almost every Archon has been called manipulative at least once because they made us fix their problem. When in actuality, when you look at the problems that they asked us to fix, they were things they were already dealing with themselves. Venti was already trying to help the Valen, regardless of whether we showed up or not. Zhongli was going to do his fetch quest on his own. We just happened to be there to help him with it. They didn't manipulate us into helping. Now, about him being a liar. I agree he is a liar. He lies about a lot of things. His aloof, happy-go-lucky personality is probably a lie too. I don't believe anyone can be that happy all the time without having to cry themselves to sleep at night. He lied about being the weakest, among other things, but that doesn't make him a liar in a bad way. He's not lying to us out of ill intent. He's not doing it to hurt us. Like Zhongli, there are certain things he can't tell us because of Celestia. We are just going to either find an Archon who doesn't mind seeing their people have a nail dropped on them for spilling the beans. Probably Saritsa. Like, from all she's doing, I have a feeling the Saritsa is probably going to be the one that tells us everything we need to know about Celestia, which is also fair because she would be the last Archon, so everything will come together at version 7 point whatever. Or we just figure all of this out by ourselves. We conveniently find a book that tells us everything we need to know about Celestia, wherever that book may be. The Archons themselves don't have much of a choice in the matter, and I don't think it is fair to paint them in a bad light because of the cards they've been dealt. They have to protect their people. Their people will come first. The traveler wanting to find their sibling, as sad and heart-wrenching as it is to be separated from someone you care so much about, weighing the sadness of the traveler over the lives of their people, it's not exactly an equal scale. The Archons will always choose their people over us, no matter how much we help them, and they appreciate our help, and they do everything they can to show that appreciation, but there's so little they can do when it comes to our predicament. Also, I really want to know why our sibling has anything to do with Celestia. Yes, they're helping the Abyss. They're helping the Conrians do whatever they do in the Abyss, and I get that, but how do the Archons know that? When we ask about our sibling, Zhongli tells us he can't tell us anything, and the only person I can think of that Zhongli would be afraid of is Celestia. So, what is the connection between our sibling and Celestia? The only connection between the sibling and Celestia would be the Conrians, the Abyss. Genshin gives us a lot of lore, but also nothing at the same time. Like, we get a lot of lore of random things, but the very important ones we don't really get. And I'm hoping when we meet Dainsleif this year, he tells us more about what our sibling is doing. Because so far, I don't really know what they're doing. Like, for the Saritsa, we can kind of guess. What is Lumine doing? Anywho. Tell me what your thoughts are on Venti, and if there are any more misconceptions you have heard about him that I didn't mention, or any other character you would like for me to cover. That is all I have for today. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and see you whenever.